we've got a sensationalist headline that was shared by Good Ranchers. And just to sort of clarify, I'm not sure if I mentioned this later on, this company is a meat delivery company. Okay, so obviously they have a strong bias because they sell meat. That's their business, so for sure. Basically, they shared this headline that obviously subsequently Joe Rogan shared as well, is new government-funded food pyramid says Lucky Charms are healthier than steak. And that is obviously a very sensationalist headline. They shared this chart, which is actually from another study, which we're going to talk about in a second.
I thought it was going to be a map of the Philippines.
Right, so basically this chart is like a mixture of all different foods, which is from this food compass, which we're going to go into. It's got a list of foods, and they're all rated from 0 to 100. 100 obviously being the best, 0 being the worst. And they've got colour coding, so green would be to be encouraged, yellow would be to be moderated, and red would be to be minimised. And on this little chart, Lucky Charms is 60, and it's in yellow, and ground beef is 26, and it's in red. Okay, along with cheddar cheese and whole egg fried in butter, they're in red. And at the top of the list in green, we've got like watermelon, kale, frosted mini wheats, unsweetened almond milk, non-fat frozen yogurt, chocolate covered almonds, orange juice with calcium, honey nut Cheerios, and dates. So it gives you a bit of context there. This chart was released with the sensationalist headline, caused a massive shitstorm. So on first glance, yeah, you could say this looks a bit odd, doesn't it? And you can understand the company is a meat company. They've reacted emotionally without exploring the context. Just want to note they didn't make the chart. As I said, this chart comes from a study. So before we go into it, because I know Tom's got a lot to say about this, is the problem that this piece of news has had is that while, yes, it was initially shared by the Good Ranchers and then Joe Rogan, and there was even people like Huberman, we'll get in, gobbing off in the comment section. We then had a sort of retaliation from what you could call the evidence-based nutrition world, a lot of it. And even then, a lot of the rebuttals they were making, you could say were misinformed. And this is where it got very complicated, because people were coming back at it saying, no, the data is actually saying this, you've got it all wrong, Joe, you're fucking stupid, blah, blah. But then some of them have also misinterpreted it a little bit, and they've kind of said something which wasn't exactly the case, and this has caused other people to get involved. We basically just had a backwards and forwards, like a little circle jerk of fucking evidence gurus going at each other for like the last week, and it's been pretty chaotic to make hang. I mean, me and Tom have only kind of just come to some sort of conclusion today, literally just before this podcast. We've been going through it all week, watching it unfold, and there's been constant post after post after post from different people in the industry, giving their take on it. And Tom, it's been a bit mad, hasn't it?
Yeah, you could say that again. It is one big hot mess, and not just like the situation in regards to like the two crowds going at each other, but the food compass in general. I mean, the creators behind it, Tufts, do pretty much admit that it needs to be improved. But yeah, God, where to begin in this? I mean, the food compass is basically, so where they got this whole idea from, that Lucky Charms is healthier than steak. It comes from a proposed nutrient scoring system, which is called the Food Compass. Now, what they do is they use like an algorithm to look into the composition of certain food. And that means they look into, I mean, I've got it here, they look into the vitamins, they want to look into fibre and protein, phytochemicals, the amount of processing, additives, lipids as well, so saturated fat, etc. And basically the algorithm does the rest. This is one of the problems with algorithms, is that it hasn't got that human attention to detail where you can kind of see through the nuance. Now, they basically graded it, as you said, where it was like, what's it, like 1 to basically 1 is like the lowest score. Like that is like, you should not eat as much of this food. This isn't really considered that healthy, compared to 100, which is like, this is actually okay. This is healthy. We want to have more of this stuff. Now, the two sides of warring over basically is, are you supposed to compare the food groups on that scale, like lumping it all together?
Cross categories.
Yeah. Do you do it across categories?
Tom, do you want to just I just want to quickly make something important on this actual study. If you actually look at it, which obviously will be linked to the show notes, is that they actually have different categories for like different stuff. So they'll have like a meat category. They'll have a vegetable category. They'll have
grains.
Whatever. They'll have all different categories. Yeah, grains and stuff. So they are all different categories. And the argument, as Tom was saying, is that people are saying that one that was shared, the graph, which was made by that study, it wasn't actually part of the Tufts, it was made. They're saying, oh, they've combined it when they shouldn't have combined it because it was never meant to be combined. And that's where a lot of the kicking off has taken place.
I mean, this is where it gets tricky because it's very hard to tell if it was actually supposed to be combined. And even because the thing is, like, there's separate things going on here. There's the actual Tufts Food Compass paper, which details the actual compass itself. But then there was also the paper which was critiquing it, which is what the Jolly Ranchers website and Joe Rogan was kind of referring to. And God, where do I begin with this, Bill? It is such a mess, it really is. But basically, like, the evidence-based crowd is saying that, no, you weren't supposed to compare all the categories together. You're only supposed to compare within the categories. So, you're only supposed to be comparing what's more healthy between, I don't know, salmon, beef, and other meat products. You're not supposed to go, well, what about meat and cereal, which is what has happened here. It's supposed to be within categories. I can have sympathies for both sides because the language of the actual Tufts study is very awkward and contradicting. Considering that this is supposed to be, a proposal for like a new food scoring system, it's really hard to bloody read, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
I mean, I'll give you an example. Like Tufts released a frequently asked questions. And to quote, they actually say, like, how should the food compass be used in practice? And I quote, it should be used in the context of other guidelines and personal goals to compare otherwise similar foods in terms of their overall contribution to health. So the key word there being similar foods. So you could read the Tufts website there and say, okay, so obviously this is supposed to be compared within the actual categories itself. But then in the abstract of the actual paper, once again, by Tufts, it then goes on to say, summed into a final food compass score, whilst listing the numbers 1 to 100. So you kind of, it's up to you to translate there as far as I'm aware. It's up to you to translate, what, are we actually comparing this across food groups or not? Because the frequently asked questions is saying similar foods. And then the actual paper itself from Tufts is saying that, it encompasses a total score at the end. And then there's graphs being released by fucking all sides here.
Everyone, yeah.
So the graph that so another criticism from the evidence-based crowd was that, like, the critique of the paper put up a graph which was shared by Joe Rogan, but the graph wasn't actually in the Tufts study itself. This is what the critique has made. So actually they've misinterpreted the data and they've made their own graph which is comparing against all the food scores. But then again, if you actually go to the Tufts website, you'll see that Tufts themselves have done pretty much a similar thing. They've put up their own graph that is, once again, like going across categories, and it's colour coded as well. So it's one big hot mess, mate. It is one big hot mess.
As you said, mate, it's like they've relied on an algorithm, okay, and they've had their criteria. You said at the start, the different things they looked at to decide what score it gets. Unfortunately, as you said, it doesn't take any nuance into account, doesn't take any common sense into account.
No.
And it doesn't really allow things like, if you look at it, say, to be encouraged, if we look at this chart that this critique paper released, basically what they're saying to me here is to be encouraged. So my diet should consist of watermelon, kale, frosted mini wheats, almond milk, frozen yogurt, Cheerios, dates. Is that all I should be eating? I mean, there's not much protein there. That's basically what they're saying is I need to be encouraged. So it's kind of, it's like,
I mean, the scorings are concerning. I mean, for example, they've got things like, they've got sweet potato crisps are actually ranked healthier than just grilled chicken breast.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
without the skin as well.
The only way I saw any sort of like, okay, this makes sense is when people were going, they're not meant to be cross category comparisons. If you actually do look at the individual charts, it does make more sense when you look at them separately. For example, the idea which they were trying to say was it'll give you can look at a category like grains and you can make a better decision on the grain you choose. You can choose a healthier grain. Unfortunately, when they then go say you can cross it, it's like, what value does that number have? What value is that 100 when if you compare it to someone else, it's saying it's not as good or it's much better. Like, what are the values of these numbers? And that's where it gets really confusing. And that's where me and Tom have sort of run into a few
I'm thinking like where obviously the algorithm's in control of this as well. I think sometimes like a higher score of a particular of a particular number may actually outweigh the actual cons of that particular food as well. So if you remember when we spoke about meta-analyses, and sometimes a single study can affect that forest plot pretty severely. I'm worried that same thing might be going on here. Well, what if there's a particular food here in a category where the lipids are really, really, really high, but at the same time, so are the nutrients. So it might counterbalance that and throw something else off of the graph there.
Yeah, sure.
So that's something I'm concerned about as well. Another important thing. So look, if we go back to claims from either side here as well, both sides are claiming that there's a conflict of interest, and depending on how far you want to take it, it does look like it is a bit suspicious on both sides. For example, Tufts has received funding from pharma companies, and there's also food companies as well. Okay. But then the critique of the paper was also funded by egg and dairy and meat industry. So if you want to play it that way, you could say both sides have a bit of a conflict of interest here. Now, that isn't to say that the study that was critiquing Tufts is straight away to be thrown out, because that's not the case, because actually the methodology is still there. Do you know what I mean? You still get some use out of this. And, at the end of the day, it is a fair critique of it, but it's just a case of it's hard to understand if the original paper, which isn't written very well, is actually saying that, we are comparing food groups. Because at one point it's saying that the whole point of it is that you're just supposed to compare similar foods within the groups. And then again, it's now saying, we now have a total score. It's a back and forth. So it's one big hot, I think the issue mess, as well, as I said.
Another problem I found with it is that people are, I don't think they even expected it to get to the place it's got to, because people are misinterpreting what it even is. It's essentially a study testing an algorithm to see what it is, and then there's people releasing headlines saying food pyramid, government guidelines. It's not government guidelines, it's not a food pyramid.
I will touch on that. They're
saying it's government funded.
I will touch on that, but I want to quickly finish with one other thing, and that is Tufts have admitted that they've said that basically the food compass on average works well across, in their words, thousands of food and beverage products. But there are exceptions. They have, I'll quote what it says here on their website. It says, as objective scientists, we accept constructive criticism and are using this to further improve the food compass. We are working on an updated version now. And that actually comes under, they've actually addressed that, on social media, basically you may have seen graphics showing certain breakfast cereals are scoring higher than eggs, cheese and meat. Did Tufts create those graphics? And they said no, but they did say that, they're basically aware of the Tufts are aware of the limitations of their study. They're not doubling down on it. They are aware of it.
That's good. They're being critical. They're critically thinking about their own paper.
I don't know how much faith I could still place in an algorithm, but going back to your last paragraph there, Bill, and that is about, government-backed. This is where I have the major issue with people like Joe Rogan and all the other tinfoil hats, etc., is that they've made it seem like it's some government conspiracy, that the government are interfering in the food choices here, and you'll go to the comments section, you'll see, they're purposely keeping us sick. Well, first of all, who the fuck are they? Who are you referring to when you say they? What, the aliens, the mafia, the Illuminati, the royal family, Harry and Meghan, the great Jewish conspiracy, Halfords? Who the fuck are they?
The Germans.
Yeah, the Germans. But no, in hindsight, it's pretty obvious that they're referring to government, because government bad. And don't get me wrong, government can be bad. Fuck me, we've only just crawled out of a war that has, fucking had untold fucking lives lost. But the government have a lot less to do with the food compass than what you actually think. So people in the comments seem to assume that, the government are interfering with this food compass here, they're influencing it because they want to keep us sick, or Big Cheerio or Big Honey Nut Loop or whoever else are behind it, they're very anti-meat. Actually, it's quite the opposite. It's actually studies like this that can actually affect government policy, which can be worrying by itself, because as we can see here, the food compass is contradicting, concerning, and pretty fucking shit, as you can see. So actually, we don't really want something like this to be influencing food policies. But it is quite the opposite from the government are funding this and are deciding to use this to control us. It's not the case. Actually, it's studies and papers like this and conferences like this that actually affect food policies. It's the complete opposite. But Joe Rogan being Joe Rogan, dog whistling, calling these conspiracists, etc., to heal, and it's all spiraled from there. All you have to do is go to the comment section of the original post by Joe Rogan, and I don't need to fucking explain myself further. You can see with your own eyes what I'm talking about. They want to keep us sick. They are trying to kill us. They want us to eat bugs. This is where misinformation wins every time. And I put up a story about this the other day, and it's that look at the conversation we've just had over the actual study itself, moving away from Joe Rogan, etc. The study itself, it requires cool heads to sit down, to try to put your bias aside, which is extremely hard to do when you look at what's going on with social media with these other influencers and researchers and scientists, etc. It's very hard to put your bias aside. It's hard to keep a cool head. It takes time as well. It also takes the skill to actually, and the patience to know what is the actual source material and what is just like a shit fucking article, based off of it. It takes time to actually translate and try and find a nuance behind it. Whereas with misinformation, someone could just simply post up a picture,
Canva graphic,
an inflamed article where it's like, in fact, let me read the fucking headline. I know you said it earlier. I've purposely tried to wipe my brain away from this. So yeah, new government-funded food pyramid in quotation marks says Lucky Charms are healthier than steak. Straight away, it's like it's something which you could look at in 5 seconds. It's done its job. It's enraged you. Oh, government! Ooh, it's done its job. You ain't got to look at the caption. You just move on. You've already taken in and soaked in that information, and it's done its job. And it's a lot quicker and a lot more emotionally engaging than actually having a discussion about it. And let's be honest, these kind of posts are targeted at a very specific part of the population. People that are already vulnerable to it. The word I use is people are belt-fed by an algorithm, and it's, thankfully it's not the algorithm of the food compass, but, it's the algorithm of you're constantly being bombarded. Because let's be honest, if you're already looking at that and thinking, oh my God, that's enragery, chances are you're already being belt-fed by an algorithm where it's like Canaan conspiracies. The government want you to do this, DMT will open your mind, etc., etc., etc. And this is the most I've got emotional over something in so long.